Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Chen, Executive Director for Asia and Pacific Islander American Vote. We'd like to thank all of you for joining us today and for volunteering to join us on Tuesday, November 4th, Election Day, as we begin to take calls and answer questions to needed voters through the Asian Language Call Center. As you've been hearing, we are continuing to promote the 888 API Vote hotline. And your participation is really crucial in ensuring that the voters get the information that they need to ensure that the vote is actually protected. So with that, I would like to go ahead and hand over the controls to Carl Hum with the Asian American Advancing Justice, AAJC, who will go ahead and conduct the training today.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine. Again, my name is Carl Hum. You have probably received numerous emails from me. I'm Vice President for Policy and Programs here at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, and once again, we're proud to partner with API Vote and also the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law to run another election protection hotline on Election Day. And first and foremost, I just wanted to thank all of you for volunteering your valuable time to join us to help protect the vote for the Asian American community. So before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that there are folks on the line, the volunteers on the line, that will be joining us all both on-site at the Lawyers Committee on Election Day and both off-site. So this presentation will cover information for both the on-site and the off-site volunteers. And first, just to give you an overview of what we're going to go over today, and I hope to do this in under an hour, is just the election protection overview, the APA vote hotline overview, your role as volunteers, the database that we'll be using, and this applies to the on-site volunteers, the various resources that you'll have, and then some common election issues. I know that there are some people on the line who are volunteering again. So if you can raise your hand, and throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. Get a little feedback over there. And if anyone who has volunteered with us before has a story that they want to tell, or an anecdote that sort of illustrates the point, you can certainly raise your hand as well. So just give you an overview on election protection. It is the nation's largest nonpartisan voter protection coalition. And really there's two goals here. Number one is to help voters, and number two is to collect data for future elections to expand access to the ballot and to protect access to the ballot. The overview is that there is a national hotline that is run by a Lawyers Committee, and then there are two language-specific hotlines. One is run by NALEO, which is a year-round hotline, and then the second one is run by API Vote and AJC, which you will be volunteering in. And that's live one day a year, and you will be staffing that effort. API Vote will be answering the phone in Bengali, Chinese, both Cantonese and Mandarin, Hindu, Urdu, Korean, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. And during your calls, and this applies for both on-site and off-site, these calls, again, we're using them to help the voter and also to collect data and information. So it's important. Volume is not the point here. It's the quality of the call. So take your time with the calls, a quality call is really getting information to the voter. So just repeating, your role as hotline volunteers to help voters in the language and also to collect data. Now, as I had mentioned, there are two kinds of volunteers that we have on the line. It's both call center volunteers that you'll be physically at the headquarters of Lawyers Committee. That's where we will be. So the shifts are again from 6 to 11, 11 to 4, and 4 until 10 o'clock. You'll get an email from from me after this presentation, just confirming your shift, your phone number if you're an off-site volunteer, and also the address of Lawyers Committee, because when you arrive for your shift, your name will be downstairs at the security desk. At the call center, Christine and I will be there, along with Terry O'Minnis and also Eric Salcedo, who works with Christine over APA Vote. We will be serving as call center captains. For the remote volunteers, you will be on call, essentially, during your shift. So just I will confirm the phone numbers that you gave me, and anytime during that shift, you could expect to get a call from us with the voter on the line. Just to give you an overview of how the problems are solved, is that the voter calls in with the problem. It goes to the call center, which you'll be answering, and it's either solved at that point or it gets elevated to a captain. And if it's a really serious problem, such as voter intimidation, voter harassment, it'll go to the National Command Center. But at the end of the day, though, hopefully the problem will be solved by the end of the call, if not by the end of the day. Now, for the remote volunteers, before your shift begins, you should expect a call from us just to make sure that you've got your phone, the phone is working, that you're available for your shift. Now, if you don't hear from us, call us. And that's at 1-888-API-VOTE, and then check in. And also, I think that most of us have this capability now because it's part of every phone, but just make sure that you have three-way calling. If you don't have three-way calling, please let me know before Election Day. Now, the call, and for some of us who have been through this before, we know that the call has 5 phases. There is the initial welcome and request for contact information. There's asking about the problem. There's the basic problem solving, it's researching the problem, resolving the problem, and then most importantly is to finish the call and inputting it into the database. This applies for the on-site volunteers. So, just in terms of how I answer the phone, this applies for the on-site volunteers. Is hello, my name is so-and-so. Thank you for calling Voter Hotline. Now, of course, you'll be saying this in your language. The phone lines will be segregated as to different languages. So when you come in to report and you say that your language is, let's say, Bengali, we will put you on the Bengali line. So feel free when you answer that phone to answer it in the language that you volunteered for. Now, most importantly for the on-site volunteers is that after you made the introduction, is to get their name and the number of the caller that is that's calling in. Again, and this also applies for the hotline, rather for the off-site volunteers, because just in case we get disconnected, we can call them back. And then, of course, finish up the introduction by asking where are you calling from and how can I help you. For those who are off-site, and again, you'll be doing a 3-way call, so be sure to repeat in English because some of the call center volunteers may be staffing phones that may not be in their language. We have a good array of volunteers, but sometimes there are gaps, and sometimes there will be a language gap. But hopefully we will connect that gap with the remote volunteer. For those folks who are coming in on-site, please be prepared to come 15 minutes prior to your shift, so you are assigned to your workstation and sort of know your whereabouts. For those who are starting the morning shift at 6 in the morning, I know that Christine and I and Terry and Eric will be there at 5:30. if not earlier. So you can certainly be assured that if you arrive by 5:45 at 1401 New York Avenue, we will be there. And again, the headquarters is over at 1401 New York Avenue. That's the Lawyers Committee on the 4th floor. Your name will be on the list. And if not, again, call us. And there is contact information at the end of this presentation to how to reach us. This is the general tip for the on-site volunteers: answering a ringing phone, even if no one's answering it, and immediately ask the voter for his or her number, just in case you need to call that person back. Now, also important is that if you are asked, just identify yourself as a trained volunteer. I don't know if there are any lawyers on the call or are volunteering with us, but please do not, if you're a lawyer or a law student, please do not identify yourself as a lawyer. And the reason why is that it could create a client, attorney-client relationship, and that gets into a world that is an entirely different discussion. So, also as a hotline, as an on-site volunteer, try to obtain as much possible information as possible: the name, the zip code, and the polling information. Now, if the caller refuses to provide any information, that's okay. Don't persist. The aim of these calls is to help the voter with their problem. The other point is, and you'll see, I'll go through the database input on the database, but there are certain checkboxes we have to make sure that we fill out, and one of them is going to be ethnicity, but pretty much we'll know that for all callers, they will be Asian. Also important is to ask the person how he or she heard about the hotline and put that in the additional information box. Remember, it's important that after the call to fill out the database that will record the nature of the call and how that call was resolved. Now, some important don'ts is this is for the on-site volunteers, is don't, and also off-site, don't enter any personally identifiable information in the dialog box in the database. You'll see that, such as the person's name, their phone number. There's a different area to put that in. I'll show that to you when we get to that slide. Do not, and this applies to all on-site, off-site volunteers, but don't engage in any partisan conversation while you're volunteering with us. So that means, that means, gee, you should vote for so-and-so, or gee, I wonder how the Democrats are doing or the Republicans are doing during this race. Stay away from all that kind of information. And most importantly, if a caller asks, who should I vote for, really say you can't answer that question and try to resolve the problem that's on hand. And again, please, I know that everyone's connected to Twitter and to Facebook and to Instagram, but please refrain from talking about your calls and also your conversations with the voters. I think it's great to tell people that you're volunteering that day on Twitter, but don't talk about the work or at least a specific call. And if there's any questions that you, for the on-site volunteers, that you have trouble answering, just let one of the team captains know. That's either me, Terry, Christine, or Eric. For the on-site volunteers, you will be in front of a station, computer station, where you'll be entering all your information. And you also have a toolbox that will help you answer questions, such as frequently asked questions and in your state. So we have each state, all the 50 states, we have frequently asked questions for election procedures and registration procedures, in addition to state manuals, the polling place, the registration links for each state, the database, and also useful external links as well. So, and again, for those who are coming on site, we'll go over this when you are there, just to remind you. Now, the next couple of slides are going to talk about Our Vote Live, which is the database, and this applies for the on-site volunteers, but also applies for the off-site volunteers, because you'll attune your listening and you'll attune the way that you ask questions to make sure that we have this information. So the Our Vote Live is basically the online reporting system that is nationwide and is connected with election protection and really aggregates all the information for this election. All the information that you'll be taking during that day will be collected through this database, and then later on, these reports will be analyzed to identify what the issues that voters faced during this election, what needs to be done in future elections. And indeed, the information that has been used during Our Vote Live has been used in lawsuits and in recommendations on how to improve election day procedures. Now, there's a test site for those who are going to be with us on site. There's a test site that's live right now, and that's ourvoteghost.org. You'll see the username is LCCRUL-hotline, and password is @creamed-the-gong. Yes, you have to use all those letters in there. But play around with it for those who are going to be on-site volunteers, because you'll see what the database looks like and really kind of how easy it is to use. I'm going to show you a screenshot of it. And excuse me. And this is the contact information section. So in the lookup, when you enter a person's address, it's pretty much like Google Maps. You know, when you sort of put in enough information or half information, it kind of auto-thinks for you. It's the same concept here, and it will autofill. But just to be sure, please to remember to put the city and state. And this will sort of reinforce you when you make the calls to make sure exactly where that person is calling from and where the poll location is. And you know, even though it autofills, you got to click on the lookup button. And again, you can play around with it after today's webinar. You'll also find in the database that there's a classification of how to categorize the call. It's either an inquiry or a problem. And the difference here is that an inquiry relates to one person. It's really a voter problem. So it could be the polling place. It could be, gee, I'm not registered, or gee, I don't know where I should be voting. And the problem is more affects a group of voters. So that could be the polling place is totally closed, or there's a poll worker here who is harassing people, or they're dividing voters into different groups, such as those who have limited English proficiency and those who can speak English. Those are problems that need to be flagged, and that could affect a wide group of voters. So be sure to categorize that call. And again, for the on-site volunteers, you will have team captains to help you with the database. It's important to track this information, again, because it helps us know things as they are happening. So if we see a trend, let's say with one poll worker or with one polling precinct, we can make a phone call and saying, hey, you know, did you know about X worker asking people, you know, crazy questions or harassing people at the poll site, so we can nip the problem in the bud. Other features of the database is making sure you get the polling place information, and even if the voter doesn't really know where he or she is, but they kind of know that they're in an elementary school, enter that data as much as possible, and we can try to pinpoint that a little later on. Also key for the on-site volunteer with regards to the database is to collect the demographic information of the voters. So that, again, for purposes of our hotline, everyone's going to be falling within the Asian category. And particularly after And for those who are following the news about voting rights, this is particularly important after the Supreme Court had basically gutted one of the key protections for voter protection during the last term. So this information is particularly important for us. It's also important to track where the caller heard about the hotline. We want to know how we're being effective. Was it through the internet? Was it through a person telling them? Was it through newspaper ads or through a postcard? We have spent a lot of time and effort in trying to publicize the number and want to make sure that which avenues are the most effective. This is a screenshot of the toolbox here, and you'll see that you'll see the different locations and states where you can look up either the FAQs, the polling place, or the registration. One word about registration, and I'll get to it a little later on. You can look up registration of individual voters, but sometimes, and I know this is particularly true for Virginia, that the database is closed only to that voter. So you may have to tell that voter to look it up on his or her own, but to call back and see how they did. If again, this is for the on-site volunteers, if you're using the facts in the toolbox, the facts are organized by issues and contains answers to a lot of the inquiries that you'll receive. And also, when in doubt, just confer with the hotline captain. Now, some of the examples that you'll be encountering that day, and that you can probably pretty much handle on your own through the facts, is where to check where to vote or checking registration status, questions about voter ID requirements. Different states have different requirements about that, and voters who are removed since registering, polling place locations, and basic information on provisional ballots. Here's some examples of problems requiring assistance, either from a team captain, and where that team captain may elevate it to a higher level. Is again the example of poll workers giving wrong information, machine breakdowns, and also confusion about provisional ballot requirements. And also accessibility issues, so let's say for either those with disabilities or with limited English proficiency. And of course, if you can't answer a question, you can always, if you can't answer a question through the facts, always ask a team captain. Again, these are the things that you should be able to do on your own with the toolbox that you'll have, registration status, polling place location and hours, questions about voter ID requirements, questions from voters who have moved since registering, and questions about voter challenges, and also basic information on provisional ballots. So this is, again, sort of going over what I had said before with some examples that require a team captain. Poll workers being part of the problem, machine breakdowns, no language assistance, and in some locations, the law requires that voting materials will be translated. You'll find that in your FAQs. So, for example, in Queens County in New York, those ballots are required to be translated in Korean and Chinese and Bengali, as well as in Harris County, Texas. But those language requirements are not nationwide. They're specific to certain areas. So be careful in terms of making sure that those areas that people are complaining about non-translated materials, that there are covered jurisdictions, and that will be included in your FAQs. And if you don't know, certainly refer to one of the captains. We will have a map of those jurisdictions that are language covered. Again, accessibility issues with people with disabilities, questions you can't answer. Also, voter intimidation, of course. Same thing like the poll worker giving people trouble during the election. And also, if you kind of see a problem that kind of has a pattern to it, just please alert a team captain. So again, some of the frequent election day problems that you'll see a recurring theme on is identification requirements, voters are moved or changed names since registering, concerns about new voting machines. Some states, varies in terms of what the technology is in that state. Questions about registration status, and also questions of people's felony convictions. Some states, if you have served your time and are part of society again, some states automatically grant the vote back to the ex-offender. But in some states, it's a little more complicated, so we have to take that on by state basis. Other issues that you may encounter has to do with voter registration. Again, registration, for qualifications, and also potential issues with voters' name not being on the roll, or whether the vote was properly registered. Again, some of these will be answerable through the fax, through the registration links, but again, the team captain will be there. So I'm going to do a little bit of hypothetical, and I'll do it with myself because it's a little difficult to get participation right now. Let's say that it is it's election day, and a voter believes that he or she is properly registered, but her name does not appear on the roll. Actually, I have one of the volunteers sitting in the room over here with me, so I'm going to ask Joy, what should she do? She is on the phone, and the name is properly registered. She believes she's probably registered, but her name doesn't appear on the roll. What would you do?
Hi, Carl. We can't hear.
Okay, you can't hear. Joy. So I asked Joy, what should she do if, let's say, a voter doesn't believe that she's publicly registered, but her name does not appear in the roll. I also have Terry, one of the team captains, just walked into the room as well.
Hi, everybody.
So we're doing the hypothetical, Terry.
Okay.
And let's say a voter believes that she's properly registered, but her name doesn't appear in the roll. What would you do?
Ask her for her information.
Right. So where and when did you last register?
Right.
And you can check on that registration information through the online tool. And that will be on your toolbox. This is, again, for the on-site volunteers. But for the off-site volunteers, be prepared to translate these kinds of answers. But as I mentioned, some states will allow the voter to do this, will only allow the voter to do this, such as Virginia. And also ask relevant questions to give the background that's to the root of the problem. So that includes, when did you last register? Right? Are you a first-time voter in this county? Have you moved since you registered? And did you receive a voter registration card from the county in the mail? Now, if the person is not a first-time voter, then encourage the voter to ask the poll worker to inquire whether the voter is now listed inactive voters are. And if the person is a first-time voter, then find out when and where they registered to vote. And if they received any confirmation, you should also look at their registration stats. Again, this is for the online volunteers who will be doing most of the troubleshooting and problem solving. And again, if I know I'm going like this a pretty fast clip, but again, you'll get the hang of this after the first half hour or so of answering calls, and there always will be the team captain not too far by to help you with these questions. Now, lastly, if a person is not able to vote, they'll be offered provisional ballot. And I'll talk a little bit about provisional ballots a little later on. But just things to look out for. with regards to voter identification is that, again, some states do require vote identification. So you're going to consult that through the various FAQs state by state. Things to look out for is social legal terms, originally disparate enforcement of voter identification laws, meaning, let's say, if a person is asking for ID only from Asian Americans or only from African Americans, that's racially disparate enforcement. Application of the voter identification laws, and again, you'll sort of tease this out from the voter as to how these identification laws are being applied. Again, potential issues with regards to intimidation, deceptive practices. This is for you to be not so much on the lookout for, but for you to be aware of, because some voters will be talking about this, but maybe not using the language that they're used to hearing. But some of this includes, again, hostile poll workers, or sometimes deceptive practices where they say, hey, Democrats, you guys vote on Tuesday, and Republicans, you guys vote on Thursday, or something to that effect. Or hey, residents of this neighborhood, you guys vote on Tuesday, and the residents of another neighborhood vote on another day. And that does happen, believe it or not. Again, in cases such as these, remember to record it into the database and to tell a team captain. Now, I talked a little bit about provisional ballots. And this slide deals with provisional balloting, and the challenge about provisional ballots is that sometimes a poll worker will just say, you know what, I can't deal with the problem right now, I'll just give you a provisional ballot. Those ballots, and depending on the state, those ballots aren't counted until after the election has been decided. And so it's therefore ineffective. And in some cases, the additional scrutiny on the ballot, where recent studies has showed that only 1 out of 3 provisional ballots are actually recorded. So, a poll worker may be, trying to solve a problem and offering a provisional ballot, but we know that provisional ballots sometimes are not counted. So it's best to try to get the voter in the booth versus getting a provisional ballot. But if they do get a provisional ballot, just to make sure that you do as much as you can to check whether that person's registered, whether that person's at the right poll location, and whether that person should be voting or not. And in some instances, where in some states provisional ballots can only be confirmed if the voter goes back to the Board of Elections or to the county with ID saying that I've cast a provisional ballot, here's my ID to verify it.
Just remember also that some polling locations have consolidated precincts in them. So sometimes it may just be that the voter is actually in the wrong line. And this is particularly important because some states will throw out the provisional ballot, as Carl mentioned, completely if they're not in the right precinct, or will only count the federal election and none of the statewide races. So that could be a simple fix, just making sure that they are in the right precinct in places with consolidated precincts.
So Terry just predicted the next slide, and that is provisional voting. Just remember, voters in the right precinct and the right polling location, and that the voters inform the next steps, and also the voter knows how to verify whether that provisional ballot is going to be counted or not. Now, we have another hypothetical here, but I'm just going to run through it just given the time over here. Is that a voter is offered a provisional ballot, but she believes that she should get a regular ballot. How should you advise the voter? Just first determine why the voter is being told she must vote provisionally. Verify the voter's information, the registration, their polling location, their precinct, and then follow up with the Board of Elections. And then, most importantly, to encourage the voter to follow up to confirm whether the provisional ballot is counted or not. Some instances, you're not going to be able to convince you're not going to be able to have that voter cast a ballot in the booth, and you have to accept the fact that that he or she will have the provisional ballot. But just make sure that you encourage that person to confirm whether that provisional ballot has been counted or not. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about assistance in polling places. Just very generally, there's a law that applies throughout the nation that allows voters assistance. So this includes anyone with a disability, anyone with language proficiency problems, or anyone who asks for assistance. They can bring someone into the booth with them. And that person doesn't have to be a registered voter. In fact, that person could be someone's child. It could be someone's 8-year-old kid or 16-year-old kid into the booth. The Voting Rights Act guarantees and allows for voters to receive assistance on Election Day. So be on the lookout for those kinds of problems. Very different from, let's say, language that I talked about earlier. Again, if as a on-site volunteer, if a poll worker denies the voter's right to assistance, please be sure to let the captain know, because that's something that needs to be risen up on a much higher level, and will be involved perhaps. Other polling place issues. It's after the time that a poll should be open. The polling place is not open. What the voters should do, if you're receiving that call, please tell the captain and encourage the voters to stay online. We'll try to make some calls to get that polling place open. Other problems that could arise to tell the captain about is problems with electronic poll books, meaning that, again, sometimes electronics doesn't work. Polls closing early. We've seen that problem where, gee, it's the polls close at 9 o'clock, but it's 8:45 and no one's around, so we might as well close early. Sometimes people are told that if you haven't cast your ballot by, let's say, 9 o'clock when the polls close, your ballot will not be cast. That's untrue. If you are in line by 9 o'clock, then your vote should be cast. So these are some problems that you can anticipate. So that covers the last bullet on that. So I try to cover as much as I can. I know I pretty much went at it at a very fast pace and a very condensed pace. It's a lot of information that's thrown at you. But for those who are going to be with us on site, we will be there to help you walk you through some of these problems and to help you solve some of these problems. And for those who are going to be off-site, what's most important for you is just to be cognizant that there are a myriad of challenges and problems that could happen on Election Day. So be patient. I know that doing three-way calling and translating is sometimes a challenge. Having been a child translator for my parents, I understand that challenge. But the most important thing here is that we help the voter, that we collect information, and that making sure that the ballot is cast. So with that, and again, I have my phone number up here if you need to contact me, and my email address. But I'll be seeing the on-site volunteers bright and early on Election Day, and hope to see all of you at some point. Again, you will be receiving an email from me confirming your shift, your telephone number if you're going to be off-site, and again, just thanking you again for your time, your effort, and your commitment, making sure that the Asian American vote is counted. Terry, do you have anything to say?
I look forward, certainly we'll be there as resources for you. So if you have any questions on Election Day, do not hesitate to ask us. We're really appreciative, Charles, that people are helping out, and we couldn't do this without you.
And Joy, I apologize for putting you on the spot.
Why don't we see if there's any questions? If anyone has any questions, you could go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, feel free to go ahead and type in your questions. Anyone? Okay, I don't see anything. Just to let you know, this has been recorded, so once it's actually uploaded, we will send you a link in case you need a refresher and you would like to review this once again. Terry, Carl, anything else?
Nope. I think we're good. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, November 4th.